I think that we can start our focus session. We are waiting some of the speakers who received too late the news about the change of venue, so they are coming, but we will try to organize in the way that we can go on in a regular way in our session. So a warm welcome to all participants to this first focus session that try to explore the issue of the theological nature of dialogue. So the importance, perhaps also the responsibility of theological reflection on dialogue that involves the question how the understanding of God, the understanding of relation of God with humanity, the will, the plan of God about relationship between human beings in different religions include dialogue as a necessity, desire, task, vocation. We will explore this important issue listening to different voices of our esteemed speakers who represent the three monotheistic religions, also in their variety and richness. I first of all introduce myself. I'm Alessandra Trotta. I'm the moderator of Tavola Valdese, the General Board of Union of Waldesian and Methodist Churches in Italy, so a very old Christian church that belongs to Protestant tradition. And I have the honor to share the task to chair this session with Adalberto Mainardi, monk of the monastic community of Bose. I think that we all have to face at least two challenges in this session. The first, I think, is to make clear how theological reflection is not something exclusive, only for experts, finally so far from real life of normal people. What we teach in faith communities, how we are educated in thinking God, what we breathe, growing up and attending in a faith community impact on real life, also contributing or not to open to dialogue as a normal practice in all dimensions of life and in civil society too. So a big responsibility for theologians. The second challenge is time. Because we are enriched by so many precious voices, we need to be disciplined in respecting time for each speech, and it means a maximum of 10 minutes for each one. We hope also to have a little time for brief contribution from public at the end. So now I pass the microphone to Adalberto for introducing the first speaker. Thank you. Okay.
Allora, grazie
Thank you very much for your attention. I'm very proud of this presidency to holding this very important, of chairing this very important panel, because dialogue is one of the reasons behind this forum, and there is also a theological nature, a point of faith in dialogue, as we said yesterday at the opening ceremony, and as it has been also reaffirmed today, as the Patriarch Bartholomew said at the roundtable of asceticism. The first
Young, who is connected.
So we'll have a video feed. Okay, so the floor to you, Mr. Faming Yang, Professor Yang, who is. So we were going to listen to your speech.
Distinguished Ms. Alessandra Trotta, distinguished Mr. Adalberto Mainardi, distinguished experts, scholars, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Salam alaikum. It's my great pleasure to be invited to participate in the G20 Interfaith Forum to discuss the important topic of the theological nature of dialogue. First of all, I would like to express my warm congratulations on the opening of the forum on behalf of the China Islamic Association. At present, the epidemic of the century and the centennial transformation are intertwined, and the challenges facing human society are endless. We're more deeply realizing the importance of the exchanges and dialogues to the world peace and development than never before. Next, I will share a few opinions based on the history and practice of the Chinese Islamic community in promoting the dialogue of civilizations. First of all, civilization dialogue has cultivated the characters of Islamic Chinese culture. Since the introduction of Islam to the land of China in a peaceful way along the Asian Silk Road in the Tang and Song dynasties, Islam has embarked on a path that conforms to the reality of the Chinese society and culture. There is a famous hadith that said, knowledge should be learned even if it is far away in China. This reflects the BPUH Prophet Muhammad's high appreciation of Chinese culture and his active advocacy of dialogue among civilizations. During the Ming and the Qing dynasties, Chinese translators represented by Wang Daiyu, Liu Zhi, Ma Zhu, and Ma Fuchu pushed the dialogue of civilizations to a new level. They are all cultural scholars who were learned on the four religions. They interpreted and promoted Islamism in Chinese characters and philosophy discourses through the activities of translating Islamic scriptures. Among them, the most prominent achievement is the in-depth integration of Islamic cognizance, Calamism, and Confucian theory of nature, creating a systematic diagram of the principles of nature and a more comprehensive explanation of the ontology of Islam theory, cosmology, and epistemology from a Chinese Islamic philosophical system based on the doctrine. And their contributions to the dialogue of civilization not only unilaterally absorb and learn from the nourishment of traditional Chinese philosophy, but also promote in-depth communication among multiple civilizations, including philosophical understanding of mind and nature, ethical understanding of cultivation and culture, the communication of etiquette and at the level of life, the communications of customs at the level of life, and many other aspects. And finally, achieve the fruits of the Islamic Confucius communication, which has cultivated the Chinese culture, benevolence, loyalty, and forgiveness, and other cultural traits of the Islamic civilization, and integrated into life constant endogenous power. Second, the common destiny enriches the connotation of Islamic patriotism. The Quran says, everyone, I have indeed created you from one man and one woman. I have made you many nations and clans so that you can get to know each other. Quran 49.13. This verse advocates active dialogue between Muslims and different groups, enhancing understanding and treat each other as equals and share honor and grace. It is under the influence of this thought that Chinese Muslims and the believers of a different religions breathe and share in a common destiny, forming a fine tradition of a patriotism and love for religion, especially since modern times. When Chinese nation was in crisis, Chinese Muslims have fought bravely together with all ethnic groups with blood to resist foreign aggression and defend the dignity of the country.
After the founding of People's Republic of China and under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, different religious communities have increasingly interacted with each other and increased their communication platforms, such as participate in politics together through the Chinese relevant political organizations, including CPPCC, maintaining peace together through the China Committee on Religion and Peace, building a consensus together through joint meeting of religious groups, and committing themselves to the cause of national construction and development. After the outbreak of the COVID-19 in 2020, all religious communities actively worked together with people of all ethnic groups across the country to overcome the hardships of the times and donated money and materials, including donations worth more than 120 million from the Chinese Islamic community. And many touching stories of fighting the pandemic demonstrated the sincere family sentiments of Chinese Muslims through practical actions, writing a magnificent new chapter of patriotism in Chinese Islamic community and continuously enriching the connotation of Islam in China. Third, share the responsibility to help build a community of human of the mankind. At present, the international environment is becoming increasingly complex, with unilateralism, protectionism, and hegemonism posing serious threats to world peace and development, and religious extremism also posing major hidden dangers to the international order and regional stability. Therefore, it is necessary to share the responsibility and build a community with a shared future for mankind. To build such a community, dialogue of civilizations is one of the most important practical paths. According to Quran, mankind were a single community, which is from chapter 2, verse 213. Mankind, be wary of your Lord who created you from a single soul and created as mate from it, and from the two of them scattered numerous men and women. Chapter 4, verse 1. The idea of the common origin of mankind in Islam is the concept of community. For a long time, the Chinese Islamic community has been actively engaged in religious dialogue and friendly relations with foreign countries on the basis of interdependence, independence, equality, and friendship, and has been steadily expanding its circle of friends in international exchanges, especially in promoting interactions and exchanges with countries along the Belt and Road, and exploring the establishment of the International Seminar on Middle-Way Thought, an international cooperation mechanism to promote the righteousness and resist extremism, aims to make efforts to address the challenges of extremist infiltration and extremism. President Xi Jinping of China have said, history tells us that only through exchanges and mutual learning can a civilization be filled with vitality. If all civilizations can uphold inclusiveness, the so-called clash of civilizations will be out of the question, and the harmony of the civilizations will become reality. We should continue to uphold equality and respect, and through academic seminars, cultural exhibitions, exchanges and visits, and training of talents, we should promote exchanges, and dialogue among different religions and harmonious coexistence, so as to contribute with the power of civilization to a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Famignan, for your contribution. And now I give the floor to the following speakers, who is Khaled Akasheh, Secretary of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. Father and Monsignor, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you. There's a correction. I am the Secretary of the Commission for Religious Relations with Muslims. Then the address of my intervention will be Theological Nature of Dialogue, a Catholic Perspective. The theological nature of interreligious dialogue is, from a Catholic viewpoint, inseparable from the theology of religions. Therefore, my intervention will briefly address both issues. First, the universal love of God through creation and providence. The universal love of God is manifested to humanity through creation and divine providence. The entire universe and each member of the human family is created by God and cared for by Him out of love. No one is excluded from the divine bounty because of bad behavior. I quote, "He causes His sun to rise on the bad as well as the good, and sends down rain to fall on the upright and the wicked alike." Besides, God's love is incompatible with favoritism. I quote, "Then Peter addressed them, the centurion Cornelius, his family and close friends. I now really understand that God has no favorites, but that anybody of any nationality who fears Him and does what is right is acceptable to Him." End of quote. Second, the universal love of God manifested in the mystery of salvation. Christians believe that God manifested His infinite love towards humanity by sending His Son to save us from eternal damnation caused by our sins. In this regard, Jesus affirmed, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave His only Son so that everyone who believes in Him may not perish but may have eternal life." St. Augustine affirmed that if the gospel were to be lost and only this verse conserved, the essence of the New Testament would be saved. Third, the Holy Spirit, present and active. Leaving this world and returning to His Father, Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to be a guide, comforter, and advocate. The Spirit, which is the supreme guide of the Church, is not confined to its visible boundaries and is free like the wind, which, I quote, "blows where it pleases. You can hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going." The development of the theology of the Holy Spirit, especially by Pope John Paul II, is of first importance for a new look at religions and at interreligious dialogue. The Saint Pontiff affirmed, I quote, "The Holy Spirit is not only present in other religions through authentic expressions of prayer. The Spirit's presence and activity affect not only individuals, but also society and history, peoples, cultures, and religions." He quoted in the same audience his words to the Roman Curia. Few weeks after the prayer for peace he convoked in Assisi, I quote, "Every authentic prayer is called forth by the Holy Spirit, who is mysteriously present in the heart of every person." Fourth, The Church, sign and instrument of communion with God and of humanity and of unity of humanity. The Church's first purpose is to be the sacrament or sign of communion or inner union of humanity with God, and also factor of the unity of the human race. This unity is already begun in the Church, but its full realization is yet to come. Interreligious dialogue is at the service of this unifying mission of the Church. In this regard, the Second Vatican Council Declaration Nostra Aetate on the relation of the Church with other religions reminded us in its first lines of the unity of humanity as per its origin and its end. The challenge, however, is how to manage our diversity, especially our religious differences, during the common earthly pilgrimage, promoting mutual respect and acceptance so as to maintain peace and harmony at all levels. 5, the salvation of those who do not believe in Christ. According to Lumen Gentium, the Second Vatican Council document on the Church, I quote, "Those who have not yet received the gospel are related in various ways to the people of God and therefore to salvation. The Jewish people is the first to be mentioned, the one, I quote, to whom the testament and the promises were given and from whom Christ was born according to the flesh. Muslims are included in this plan of salvation in the first place among, I quote, those who acknowledge the Creator. Besides, they, I quote, profess the faith of Abraham, end of quote, and along with Christians, I quote again, adore the one God, the one and merciful God, judge of the mankind, who on the last day will judge mankind. The seekers of the unknown God, those who strive by their deeds to do his will, as it is known to them through the dictates of their conscience, and also those who strive to a good life will be saved. Profoundly and irrevocably engaged in interreligious dialogue, the Church is also engaged in preaching the gospel in obedience to the command of her Lord, preach the gospel to every creature. The delicate relation between proclamation and dialogue has been a central theme in the reflection of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue in the Vatican. I am proud to represent my dicastery at this forum and pleased to convey to you the cordial greetings and the prayerful wishes of the President Cardinal Miguel Ayuso and those of all the staff. To conclude, the theology of religions and the theology of interreligious dialogue are open fields for study and discussion. Besides, we are certain that dialogue among believers is not an option, but a necessary tool for peace, fraternity, cooperation for the common good, and for human and spiritual growth. I thank you for your kind attention.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monsignor Khaled Akasheh. Thank you very much, Monsignore.
And I have now the pleasure to introduce Edmond Brahimaj, Babi Mondi, the war grandfather of the Islamic Bektashi community. He is speaking in Albanian, but the translator, I think, have the translation in English, so they can provide translation using our instrument. So thank you so much.
Is English working? Yes. On name of God, the beneficent, the merciful, distinguished, prominent state personality, dear brothers, ladies, of sisters, leaders of the different religions and belief, dear organizers, especially Mr. Navarre. Of course, I consider myself lucky to participate in such an event, so necessary for today's development, and allow me in my capacity as a World Bektashi leader to wish you luck and prosperity in your families and nations. Interfaith dialogue traveled throughout human history with religious and beliefs from the most diverse, quite distant from each other in terms of unique truth. Every individual or religious community has openly manifested a structure of its own identity and culture, seeking at all times with its own spirit and life to be as close as possible to the attention of the Creator. At the same time, during this journey, the God attention of the Creator, the good attention of the Creator, at the same time during this journey, the good believer have never disregarded the feelings, codes, and customs that came from the religion of the brother he has in his arms. As Prophet Muhammad have been very close to all religions, especially to the Christian ones, and we have also from Prophet, peace upon him, who when he entered to Mecca, visitors gathered all friends and enemies and proclaimed, you, O you people, he said, O you people, indeed we created you from male and female, and male made you into nations and tribes that you may be known among yourselves. There is no doubt that with Allah, the most honest of you is the one who is most protected from evil, and Allah is all-knowing of all things. That's in Quran 49:13. I have also a great truth that to the Tariqa of which I belong, the Bektashi, in which I am fortunate to lead today, this fragment flower in the garden of Islam may renewed theologians have recognized and appreciated a valuable future of it, wisdom, a wisdom that has conceived in his DNA. Albania, the nation to which I belong, can be proud with the slightest doubt of it, religious and identity treasure. The deep dialogue and permanent brotherhood between believers of different religions and faith, it has been God's will, of course, but also the sad history of the Balkans for the compromise and to the temporary separated from mosques, tekes and churches to unite the difference of the homeland, as well as their tradition, faith, and to return to all their customary codes to objects. And so today, more than ever, in this world full of unrest, epidemics, and all kinds of Yes, yes, no problem. Yes. So today, it's just the last. So today, more than ever, in this world full of unrest, epidemic, and all kinds of physical and spiritual wars, a more courageous imaginations and full perceptions of religious dialogue is worthwhile. It is a heavy burden, each one having to shoulder his own without waiting for the weight to faith on the others. Let us be united in ideas and attitudes, because this is how our prayer to the all merciful are accepted. God bless you all. Amen. Thank you.
Now?
Now I have the pleasure to introduce His Eminence Archbishop Leonid of Vladikavkaz. He's the Deputy Chair of the Department of External Church Relation of the MoscowPatriarchate. Most of you have already listened to him when he read yesterday the address to this forum by His Holiness Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill. Now he is addressing his own speech. We have the pleasure to listen to you. Vladika Leonid, the floor is yours.
Спасибо большое, уважаемая госпожа Александра Тротта, уважаемый и дорогой наш собрат Адальберто.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mrs. Alessandra Trotta, everybody would like to welcome you on behalf of the Orthodox Church in Russia. The Interfaith Forum is needed because of this time. We would like to thank Italy and Andrea Riccardi for the opportunity to participate. I would like also to thank you on behalf of Włodczynski Lajong, and he thanks Professor Riccardi and Sant'Egidio community. Professor Riccardi was awarded the honoris causa laureate degree, and his dissertation was translated into Russia. It is extremely successful in Russia as well. Now, it deals with the meaning of interfaith communication, and it is really open-minded. Today, we can exchange views about problems and issues, and we can put forward proposals for the leaders of the G20. I also would like to point out that over the last few years, interreligious dialogue has restarted. In particular, Muslim countries and also African countries are deploying important efforts in order to promote collaboration, equal opportunities from a religious point of view. In many countries, there were persecutions, but today the trend is positive in terms of freedom of religion. At the beginning of the 20th century in particular, religion has been interpreted as something which is natural, and it promotes and enhances the progress and development. So in the past, the religion was misinterpreted and misunderstood. So such an old meaning had to be overcome. Such a position is associated with the opposition between science and religion, and also positivism. but this has a huge impact on our country, where secularism is actually promoting and developing. But on the contrary, the situation is not the same. As Peter Berger said, the word is religious as it was in the past, and in some areas the word it is even more religious than it was in the past. Modernity, according to this scholar, brought about the pluralism of worldviews and systems within a unique society. The development of the social media and digital technologies, for example, but also the chatting instruments and also the increased mobility of men, all this created one single space for communication. As McLuhan said, the Canadian philosopher said, the word has shrunk, and now we live in a modern world where the religious conscience is present, very important, and there is a sort of interrelation between different religions. So the interpretation of the system of problems is very important, and in particular, maintaining the contact, the dialogue and relation between different religions, and this is actually the meaning of the interfaith dialogue. Now, this session is dedicated to the theological nature of dialogue, which is very important. According to the Catholic definition, we have a theological, practical, and spiritual. So the theological nature of dialogue is understanding others' religion, and also having a deep understanding of other people's religion. To do so, we have different principles for the creation of the interfaith dialogue. For example, from a former point of view, the monk dialogue could be a form of that, but we can also consider the dialogue between scientists and scholars and also religious people, looking, for example, at the image of God as one of them. The Russian Orthodox Church has worked within the Russian-Iranian Commission when it comes to the Islamic dialogue, in particular on eschatology and also the perception of God. But starting from Cyrillus, actually, the practical dialogue was started, and also multi-ethnical relations. We also have the Russian Interreligious Council created in 1998 by religious leaders, and so the different leaders of communities enter into a dialogue and try to fix and solve problems all together. So they support and help the others. The council supports exchange of good practices within this platform, such as, for example, the Universal Conference for Peace. So all the leaders promote dialogue and friendship. The practical aspect of dialogue is very important for our church, but also for the Catholic Church. For example, Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti encyclical were very important documents where he addressed social problems. So, for example, different political aspects such as solidarity, the solution of conflicts, global problems. But the document also contains the Christian and theological position and opinion on these political and social issues. The Fratelli Tutti encyclical promotes friendship and good neighborhood relations, regardless of the race and religion of people. Well, this can be considered as a good example of interreligious dialogue from a conceptual point of view. So our reference point when it comes to the dialogue with other people, well, the example of Jesus Christ is clear in the texts. We have a lot of examples, in particular with one person. Christ actually was very gentle and friendly, and there is also the criteria of morality, and also every soul could be Christian actually, but regardless of race and religion, every person has traces of God. So as Adam was created, so we are people, but it is how we were treated, because God said, you as a human being, so you have to reflect your light and to do that in your actions. Having said this, I would like also to provide a practical example. In 2017 in Russia, a task force was created in order to help the Syrian population. The task force consists of Christians and Muslims coming from all over the country. Also Jewish and Buddhists will participate in that. So this task force actually helps Christians, Muslims, any person in need in Syria. And this task force provides food and build schools, and also priests and archbishops go there to help and support the population. So the practical aspect of dialogue is paramount, both for our church and also for the Catholic Church. And I have to say that in particular, we are helping children, in particular children who suffered mutilations, for example, regardless of their religion, the religion of their families. We also set up a commission for collaboration with the Muslim world. We could also mention the declaration of fraternity among the people from all over the world, signed by Pope Francis in Abu Dhabi in February 2019. And also Al-Azkar Mag Al-Tayyeb, the Imam of the university. So when it comes to the Russian Orthodox Church, Gregorio Matrusov, and also our department for the church relations, I have to say that all these people belong to this group. But going back to the interpretation of the inter-religion dialogue, we have also to talk about Apostle Peter, who provided important indication. He said that we have to respect others people, we have to behave in love, and also to create a world where there is no evil. We also have to remind that Peter said that we have to respect other people's and to respect other people's religion. I also would like to mention the fact that in practice we do all this in our country. So let me give you some examples. We have a university for church studies, postdoctoral department, and so this is a group of people meeting quite often, and I believe that if we want to protect the peace for the future generations, we have to build the peace and religious education. As Christ said that we have to educate all the people. Well, also the theological aspects are very important to our department. Now, let me move to the very last part of my presentation concerning the challenges we have to face. Let's consider Christian persecutions. After the elimination of the terrorist force in Middle East, now terrorism is present in Africa. We have to be honest, 100% honest. I have to say that Africa is suffering, and there are massacres going on in Nigeria, in Congo, against Christians, of course, Burkina Faso and Mozambique and other states, other countries, where there are bands of extremists, and they kill so many people, so many Christians, and we are silent. So I think that's in the very last, in the final document of the forum, we should also consider the situation of Christians in Africa. As believers, we shouldn't be silent. We cannot neglect the rights of Christians and also the rights of believers in Ukraine. Hundreds of churches which are seized by the government, and they are given to the Ukraine Orthodox Church created by the former President Poroshenko. And this happens, and also there is violence and abuses which are perpetrated against priests, but they are not punished. Last but not least, I also would like to look at our religious world and give you some insight. I have to say that a lot has happened over the last few years, and this has had an impact on religions. Churches are important for believers. Through prayers, we can open up to the vulnerabilities of our being, and when there is a prayer, there is a God, and sometimes it's not possible to do that in the churches, in the places of worship. It's not possible to pray, and this has a huge impact on the inter-religious dialogue. Also considering what is going on in Jerusalem and in Turkey as well, in the Caucasian region, but everywhere, I would say. In May next year in Russia, we will host the Interfaith and Inter-Ethnic Dialogue International Forum, and I hope to see many of you. So let me now conclude my speech by saying that we have to go beyond ideologies. We have to put our efforts together for the people who really need our support. If we as religious leaders, we fight against the ideology of selfishness, of hate and consumism, I believe that if we can do that, we can give a great contribution to our religious world. So our slogan would be, help each other. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Also for this focus on the challenge of promoting and defending religious freedom everywhere and for everyone, I can add, because we have a lot of problems all over the world. And now I think that we are ready to listen to Bertram Johannes Meier, Bishop of Ausburg and Chair of the Sub-Commission for the Interreligious Dialogue of the German Bishop Conference of the Roman Catholic Church.
Grazie mille, signora Trotta, per l'invito.
Thank you very much for the invitation, for your introduction. Now, I would like to switch from Dante's language to Shakespeare's language, even saying that I'm not a big master of English, so I apologize for my mistakes.
We cannot truly call on God, the Father of all, if we refuse to treat in a brotherly way any man created as he is in the image of God. This sentence brings together the esteem with which the Church has approached people of other faiths since the Second Vatican Council. The Nostra Aetate Declaration is quite rightly regarded as the Catholic Magna Carta of Interfaith Dialogue. Nostra Aetate Magna Carta. This document, which was adopted in October 1965 at the end of the Council, soon took on such an impact that an only slightly older doctrinal letter might easily be forgotten, namely Pope Paul VI's inaugural encyclical Ecclesiam Suam. The term dialogue is largely unused in earlier documents of the Roman Magisterium, and interestingly also does not explicitly come up in Nostra Aetate. Paul VI, however, elevates it to a key term in Ecclesiam Suam. Dialogue as key term in Ecclesiam Suam. The church must enter into dialogue with the world. In fact, it becomes clear that dialogue forms part of the essence of the church. This encyclical, published in August 1964, can therefore be described without exaggeration as the dialogue encyclical par excellence. The starting point of Paul VI was the conviction that noble origin of this dialogue is in the mind of God himself. If one understands religion by its nature as a relationship between God and man, then the entire history of the church can be understood as a dynamic of dialogue. Indeed, the whole history of man's salvation is one long dialogue which begins with God. God first loved us. The relationship between God and man is one dialogue. Not only a method, is the essence of the church, but dialogue with whom and for what purpose. Starting from the conversation between God and his creatures, the Pope outlines in Ecclesiam Suam the image of a church characterized by a diversity of forms of dialogue, with 3 concentric circles around a common core. First of all, there is a wide, immense circle which is made up by the entire human race, the world. This is about a dialogue in which the church engages with all people in order to serve the cause of peace. The second circle in the dialogue encompasses all those men who worship the one supreme God, whom we also worship. Jews and Muslims are particularly emphasized, without failing to mention the followers of the great Afro-Asiatic religions. The basis is formed by an attitude of mutual respect and acknowledgement. The third circle finally describes ecumenical dialogue with the separated Christian brothers and sisters. It is carried out with respect for the traditions of the other denominations, but also in hopes of one day being able to overcome the separation. That having been said, dialogue is not only to determine the relationship of the church with the respective others, but also to shape her inner life. We have in Germany the so-called synodal way. It's a dialogue process in the church. And I think we must also consider this. It becomes clear that Paul VI thinks of the church entirely as a dialogical community, which for him does not entail the abolition of different vocations and talents. If we ask a closer look at the dialogue with Jews and Muslims, we find in the text of the Council an important foundation for the special bond with the monotheistic brothers and sisters. Like all human beings, they are children of the one God. We form, all of us, one family. But the Council further states that they also worship the same God. God has never dissolved the covenant which he made with the Jewish people. And with regard to Muslims, the dogmatic constitution on the church emphasizes that they are professing to hold the faith of Abraham and along with us adore the one and merciful God. The important word in the Latin text is nobiscum. The Latin verse in our Holy Mass is also Dominus vobiscum. And now we say, nobiscum, they are sisters and brothers, nobiscum, with us. The motif of the brotherly connection between all people, which was laid down by Paul VI and in the Council text, has been taken up and developed further by Pope Francis in recent times. We all are related to one another through our relationship with the Creator, who has entrusted us with caring for the earth, our common home. We have listened to Bartholomeus today, the Green Pope. God's history with human beings, like the history of human beings with one another, is a history of relationships. Relationship, also our Congress here, is an event of relationship. The theological orientations that Pope Francis has given for interreligious dialogue are important. Let me pick out only one thought here. The deep bond with people of different religions and worldviews springs not least from a capacity of empathy and compassion. It is no coincidence that the interpretation of the speech of the God of the Good Samaritan forms a spiritual focal point to the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Love does not care if a brother or sister in need comes from one place or another. Or as Pope Francis and Grand Imam Ahmad al-Taib stated together in Abu Dhabi, faith leads a believer to see in the other a brother or sister to be supported and loved. This was also the attitude with which Pope Francis visited Iraq in March of this year. In this country marked by war and violence, he paid tribute to the commitment of all those who day after day engage in a dialogue of life. Amid the silence and indifference of the world, they have embarked upon journeys of fraternity. Those who believe in God are called on to make brotherhood among people a concrete experience. This is a strong, theologically based motivation to seek dialogue again and again, even and especially under adverse circumstances. And I finish with one statement. Without dialogue, much is lost, but with dialogue, we can gain a lot. Greater peace and understanding among the religions. Thank you for your attention.
So we call Ibrahim Saleh Al-Nahimi and Mohamed Nazir Ayad. Thank you. The image of our time. We hope that we can stop as soon as possible, but that's okay.
Thank you for your attention. Now we have our next speakers, and we have heard a lot about dialogue, and then they will continue. Please present them.
So now we are going to listen to Ibrahim Saleh Al-Nahimi, who is the chairman of the Doha International Center for Interreligious Dialogue in Qatar. Thank you.
Qatar.
See? Yes. They control. We don't know why and how, but we can trust.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening or good afternoon. I wish to sincerely thank the G20 and committee for the invitation and this providing this platform. It is really with great pleasure that I stand here or sit in fact in front of you at this momentous gathering, committed to healing the wounds of our societies through the goodness vested in religion and religious communities. It cannot be said enough of how important and crucial a time it is to be engaging with religious leaders, communities, and policymakers in the light of recent world events. Because of much worry and instability for religious communities over the past few years has been the steady and global rise in hate speech, intolerance, xenophobia, religious nationalism, and extremism. On the other hand, the pandemic, while forcing a sudden shift of the world's priorities, has also opened Pandora's box, exposing hidden inequalities, shadow pandemics, and societal and institutional discrepancies. Together, these phenomena impede our collective progress towards sustainable development goals and dangerously stunt our prosperity as a globalized world. These trends, however, are not born in and of itself, but are in fact reflections of deep-rooted issues and concerns left festering and neglected. It is hence this task of ours to identify these issues and create solutions that serve the dire need of the hour, calling for innovation and expansion in our efforts across civilization and interfaith dialogue. The Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue, my center, inspires toward and has long been working to achieve this goal. Our center is a leading organization in Qatar promoting interfaith dialogue and the culture of peace. It strives to serve humanity as a whole on the basis of mutual respect and the recognition of others. Several key interfaith issues and perspectives have been brought to light here at the forum yesterday and today. The theological nature of dialogue is one among them, as essential element to combating hatred and other challenges plaguing religious communities. But what do we mean by a theology of dialogue, the title of our session? And how does one go about actualizing this? Who are the real actors of dialogues, and who can the religious communities bring about peaceful coexistence? The actor of dialogue, as we see it, contrary to popular belief, the dialogue doesn't start or restricted to ourselves to the diplomats and the peacemakers and religious leaders, but in fact it begins so early. The very moment we begin to speak in its simplest form, dialogue is the ability to effectively communicate, actively listen, and exchange points of view without fixed ends or goals or gains. It is the skill human minds were designed to perfect, and the skill we have had the most training in by default of being part of society. Yet, despite being closely associated, we witness religious extremism and hatred far too often, wreaking havoc upon peaceful coexistence and leading scores to question the legitimacy of religion's claim of tolerance, ethics, and morals. While the center firmly recognizes and acknowledges the essence of every religious tradition to be the ethical and moral betterment of its followers, we also recognize that much work remains in bringing balance to religious identities. Most efforts largely concentrate on maintaining and preserving one's own religious identity, oftentimes neglected their relationships to communities outside of itself. The fortification of identity boundaries along the lines of exclusion from the beginning of intolerance and dehumanization of the other. Only when, if we're going to talk about the goals of the dialogue, only when we begin to address and practice the values of coexistence will we be able to reach out to the very heart of religious communities and affect change from within. Laying the foundations of a balanced theological basis for dialogue will help facilitate the overall growth of society. facilitating ideas of tolerance, diversity, and love for the other brings people together, subsequently fostering social, economic, and political cooperation for a stronger and more unified society. The goals of dialogue, in essence, is to broaden the attitude and abilities of peoples to engage with differences and exchange ideas without experiencing threat. It is to be able to hold one's boundaries while listening to conflicting ideas and to be able to agree and disagree in a healthy and respectable manner. Reviving the theological nature of dialogue from within religious traditions will allow people of faith to feel secure in their positions and interaction with the religious of the other. In this regard, the center holds regular dialogues, workshops, roundtables for the local and as well as for the international communities, and annual conferences for academics and religious leaders. The center also hosts cultural events in Qatar, a hallmark of it being the Ramadan Iftar, which brings together different communities for a feast during the holy month of Ramadan, strengthening community bonds and promoting values of generosity and hospitality. I would be remiss if I did not involve the youth who, when we speak about the dialogue, the youth of today have tremendous potential and are unlike the generations that have come before us. It is paramount that they be engaged, guided, and supported to reach platforms and institutions that can effectively have a positive impact and a positive change. This requires the integrated efforts of institutions on every level, collectively working toward national vision paired with robust assessment and feedback. When we talk about the otherness as a treasure, otherness should be perceived in the light of God's magnificence and mercy and beauty. We should embody the compassion and humility in our of being a believer in God. As the beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, none of you will believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Those who work in interfaith dialogue can recognize the joy and harmony that comes from witnessing these values and practice. Otherness is a treasure that is not my country, Qatar, believes that a community that treasures otherness is guaranteed to propel itself towards the goodness humanity so desperately needs. In conclusion, while we are here today with the spirit of hope to light our way and the belief that good will be prevail when people come together as one, we must wake up to the urgency of expanding efforts to appropriately engage religious communities to be agents of change, cohesion, education, and most of all, peace. Representing the message from the center in this gathering and this forum, I urge all fellow leaders to action and would thus like to conclude with the Islamic greetings and salutations of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace be upon you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, the last one? No? I think.
We are approaching the end of our panel with the last of our speakers, Mohammad Nazir Ayad. He is the Secretary General of the Islamic Research Assembly. So, dear Professor Mohammad Nazir Ayad, the floor is yours.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah wa ba'd. بداية سلام من الله عليكم ورحمته وبركاته وأسأل الله تعالى.
Thank you. First of all, we call on God for the success of this meeting. I would like to greet you all On behalf of our Chairman and President, we hope this forum can achieve the goals we set, and we expect dialogue to be present among human beings. We live in a world where there are many religions, and as human beings, if we look at each other, at other human beings, well, it is quite clear that there is a plurality and diversity. This means that this has to be recognized. Islam looks at religious plurality as a need on a daily basis. This is a universal law, as Allah said in the Quran. All believers are recognized in humanity. God said, we created you men and women, and our religion recognizes and acknowledges religious plurality. So the dialogue, the interfaith dialogue is important. It is established in the Quran when, for example, it is said the populations of the book, the people of the book, and also it is said that we have to consider what it is adequate also for the others, and also the dialogue must start from the founding principles to make sure that there is collaboration. For example, God said there is no better religion than others, and we can see it in the life of the prophet. The prophet talked to Muslims and welcomed in the mosque. There is also another document, the document of Medina, which is an important document proving the dialogue that existed back at that time, and in particular the equality of rights and the importance of dialogue between religions, starting from these foundations. So the importance of dialogue and strengthening the values of dialogue, this is always been as such. So the coexistence and the dialogue, it is indeed important to remind the values that represent the vision of Islam. As it has been said already by the previous speakers, this is the basis for the dialogue between religions. The dialogue is a need we have considering the differences among human beings. The dialogue among people, among men and women, this is on the basis of what we have in common as human beings. And also we have to recognize that what came from the sky, actually, it is the pursuit of the common good for humanity, for all human beings. And also, Islam is not a religion separated from the other religions. It is a unique religion from Adam to Muhammad. It is an invitation, it is a call towards God on the basis of a dialogue which is respectful toward the others. There is no offense. There is no violation of the dignity of other religions. Islam has nothing to do with all the attempts to force people to actually, be a Muslim. There is no violence in the religion. This is not part of that. And the dialogue is present in the Quran. And when it comes also to the relations and conflicts between human beings. And so the peace, but also all other aspects are so present in the Quran. For example, peace, the word peace is written 140 times in the Quran, whereas the word war is present only 6 times. So the principle of peace is clearly a principle for Muslims, and in particular also the dialogue and the relation between Muslims and other people. So starting from this vision, starting from the dialogue, well, we started to strengthen the principles of dialogue and coexistence in the world. For example, through conferences and international seminars, starting from the international role of our assembly. So we also organized international conferences to start a dialogue between Muslims and non-Muslims in order to show the real nature of Islam, Islam's vision of the other, because the message in the Quran is a message of peace. Let me remind, for example, the International Conference Against Terrorism in December 2019. And among the recommendations of this conference, it was said that the plurality of religions is not an emergency. We should not create religious rationales or reasons to trigger conflicts. This is not in line with what is written in the Quran. And also in 2017, another conference was organized on freedom and citizenship. And in particular, there is also mentioning the idea of citizenship. For example, what we find when it comes to the city of Medina, there is no discrimination between the members of society. So everybody was part of this. There is a social plurality. That was the case when it was the time of Mohammed. And so we believe in the dialogue in order to contribute to peace. So, for example, our assembly organized a conference on peace in April 2017, and the Imam at that time reiterated the importance of dialogue and said that the Quran recognizes differences between people when it comes to religion, when it comes to race, and God wanted to create different believers, and the difference is part of Islam, and this cannot disappear until the word will be there. So the freedom of worship is important, and also differences should be accepted. Freedom of worship on one side, but this requires the freedom as a whole. So the dialogue is important in order to create positive relations among human beings, in order to reiterate the importance of dialogue and how we should respect each other. In October 2018, a conference was held, Islam and the West World. That was the title, Diversity and Integration. The main goal was to go beyond the false ideas according to which it is impossible to have a dialogue between the Eastern and the Western world. So the idea was to go beyond the stereotypes and prejudices when it comes to Muslims and Islam, freedom in order to reach common values based on scientific visions, strengthening collaboration and putting together different world views and exchanges, considering what Judaism, Islam and Christianism says. And basically a dialogue was started all over the world. And also a council of the wise people of Islam was created. Such a council is independent, although he had important roles, and different initiatives and projects were started through a constructive dialogue. And also the Imam went to the Eastern and Western world to disseminate dialogue as a tool for peace. And finally, the document for universal brotherhood, fraternity. First of all, dialogue, understanding and dissemination of the culture of accepting the other. All these can contribute to fixing and solving many problems among human beings, and such a document reiterates the importance of a dialogue among believers. And the dialogue is the encounter of values, of social, human and spiritual values. Of course, we are talking about common values. So let me once again repeat the importance of dialogue. And in particular, dialogue is one of the tools we use to strengthen coexistence and peaceful coexistence, and to disseminate the message of respecting each other, and to live in peace with the other people, regardless of color of the skin, race and religion. So thank you, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, Marcelo Polakov cannot be with us this evening, but we had a very intensive session, and we appreciate and say thank you to all our speakers. Because it's so late, I don't think that there is time in order to listen to questions from the public. I think that there is just time for a few words of conclusion, if Adalberto wants to conclude.
Yes, we have a very intense session. I will not resume what we have already listened to, but just 3 remarks. First, the theological nature of dialogue was one of the themes of our focus, and I think was developed in very different and profound ways. The intervention of Monsignor Akasheh has reminded us the importance of Lumen Gentium, as well as the intervention of Bishop Bertram Meier, that God himself is in dialogue with man, is dialogue itself. So the very theological nature of dialogue is in God, and God who speaks to man. And I think the importance of the last 2 interventions that we have heard by Ibrahim Saleh Al-Naimi and Mohammed Nazir Ayad, that says the differences are something that God wants in man, so are blessed, something that is for men to treasure, to guard, to develop. And the experience of the Russian Orthodox Church, who has a long dialogue with Muslims as well as with Jews and other Christians, was illustrated by His Eminence Leonid. It was an interesting contribution to our discussion. And as Haji Mondi has said, this is also lived in practice. For instance, in Albania, and in some ways, we know a country that has a lot suffered from atheism, and our religions are called to discover God as dialogue, but man has dialogue, and this is the only way to peace. I think that these things that we can pick up for our panel are very important, and I hope that as the speakers has vowed, there will be some documents or proposition for our forum.
Thank to all.